This little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Know that I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, you know I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Whoa.
The Deas family hails from Sierra Leone, Africa, as we know it, based on documents David and John Deas, slave traders, who brought the Deas family to the Charleston coast during the late 1700s. They settled on the Buckhall and the Cummington tea plantations. Robert Sr. and wife had 5 children. They settled there in Charleston and eventually lived in a home on Line Street in Charleston. But Joseph, one of the 5 children, married Celia Deas.
I also remember my Grandma Deas telling us about a story when she was a young girl during the Civil War. And she told us how she remembered the soldiers coming into the yard there where she lived. She was a house slave, I might say. And she recalls that because the family had anticipated the coming of the soldiers, the family took as much of the good silver that they had, because they were very wealthy, these white people where she lived. They took the silver and rolled it up in some kind of a satchel or whatever, and dug a hole somewhere on the plantation and put the silver deep down into a hole. Then they put the dirt back in and covered it up as best they could. And on the very top of the land where the dirt was to go, they took a dead animal. I honestly don't remember whether it was a chicken or some kind of a dog or what, but they put this animal on the top and covered it up to make it look as though that was just a grave for the animal. And consequently, when the soldiers looked around, they never found the silver. For all I know, that silver might still be down there in the ground. Would that be a surprise?
Celia Deas's mother, Alice Kinlock, and brother, Butler Kinlock, lived on the Cummington tea plantation with the Kinlocks. But there's a royal story behind that. We understand that her great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Hardcastle, had actually been traded by her grandfather and her grandmother, and she was an African princess. Documents show that Elizabeth Kinlock Hardcastle was a determined fighter who fought in court and eventually won a court case. They had children and eventually all moved to the northern part of New Jersey, Rutherford, New Jersey. Joseph and Celia lived there with their children, most of whom eventually spread out to areas in Brooklyn and Queens. Little Beatrice, the last, was actually born in the Rutherford home in Rutherford, New Jersey, and Joseph D. died, one of the wealthiest African-American men in Rutherford, New Jersey. He had started a carting service there in Rutherford. He had his own home built at 95 Eastern Way.
One of the many things that I remember as a child was our family Thanksgiving in Rutherford, New Jersey. My grandmother, whose name was Celia, and who I was named after, was a person who was married to Joseph, and Joseph had one of the nicest homes in Rutherford. We used to go there Thanksgiving. The whole family would go. All my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my brothers, my family, everybody. And my grandmother and grandfather lived with two of my aunts, my Aunt Ellie and my Aunt Beatrice. I called her Aunt Bee. Aunt Ellie loved fine things, fine china, fine crystal, some of which I have in my china closet. Beautiful stemware, and the table was set with lace tablecloths and fine dishes. A big dinner was served, and everybody was happy. The children, one of which I was, were seated in the living room at a card table because there just wasn't enough room for everyone. But we had such a joyous time. My cousin Alice, Cheryl, and my brother and Earl, those three boys were such good friends. They were always together. And we had such a very nice time. And we were just so happy to see our cousins. We would play and have such a joyful time. That was just one of the times that I remember as a little girl. And we did that up until everybody was just grown and, done here and there. But it was a lovely, lovely memory.
The Withington family hails from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We know during that time that they would have been free blacks living in that area. Eventually, the majority of them moved up and down the Jersey Shore to cities including but not limited to Atlantic City, Cape May, Red Bank, New Jersey, and Monmouth County. Catherine and Samuel had 18 children, and Cornelius Withington was one of them, who eventually moved to Brooklyn, New York. And he married Mary Sutton.
It's my understanding that my family, the Withington family, originally came from England. I know of my grandfather's mother was supposed to inherit some property from England, but when they came over here and saw our brown faces, they decided that we were not eligible to inherit all this money, so they switched things and they sent over a floor that came from the mansion that the Schuylers had in England.
The Withington family, Cornelius, and who married Mary Sutton, were during that time period considered to be well-off coloreds. They lived in Brooklyn, and they had that floor in their home with their daughters Therese, Genevieve, and Consuelo Withington, both of whom were bred and raised in a manner of which coloreds then weren't really accustomed. They took language classes, music lessons. They traveled, and for blacks during that time period, the area of Weeksville in Brooklyn was considered very well-to-do. But Therese and Consuelo never shunned what was they were supposed to do during that time. Therese, in fact, married and honeymooned in Cape May. She married Walter Ford, and her sister Consuelo married George Lynch. Mary Sutton was born in 1860 on the Shinnecock Indian Reservation, but she too aspired to leave that area of Long Island, New York, and eventually moved to an area of Glen Cove. Isaac, her brother, who was affectionately called Uncle Ike, and Mary used to go back and visit some of their Shinnecock relatives. Charles Ford's grandmother was born in Franklin, Virginia, about 1840, and interestingly enough, came from the same town as Booker T. Washington.
My grandfather and grandmother Ford on my father's side, my father's mother and father, they met down in Hampton University while they were attending the college there. And they got married at that time, which just goes to show you that we do have college people in our background. Way back.
Yes, it was on the campus of Hampton Institute in 1884 that Charles Ford, hailing from Franklin, Virginia, met and married Mary Thompson from Raleigh, North Carolina. She was thought to have been an Indian, but the two did meet. The two fell in love, and they too eventually moved to Jersey City, New Jersey, where they started their family: Blanche, Jesse, Charles Jr., Walter, and Ethel. The only one of those children, Walter, had a son, Cornelius. But Walter married to raise Genevieve Withington, and the Withington Deas legacy lives on.
This little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, you know I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, everywhere, everywhere I go, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere. Everywhere I go, you know I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere, everywhere I go, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh.
Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Gonna let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Whoa. Don't let Satan blow it out.
Don't let the devil blow it like, don't you let him blow it. Hey, don't let him blow it. Don't let him blow it out. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Whoa. This little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, you know I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh. Everywhere, everywhere I go, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere, everywhere I go, you know I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere, everywhere I go, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Whoa.
Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Gonna let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Whoa. Don't let Satan blow it out.
Don't let that devil blow it like, don't you let him blow it. Hey, don't let him blow it. Don't let him blow it out. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Whoa. Hide it under a bushel. I'm gonna let it. I'm gonna let it. Hide it under a bushel. No. I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Whoa. This little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, you know I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Jesus gave it to me, well, and you know I'm gonna let it shine.
My sweet
Jesus gave it to me, you know I'm gonna let it shine. Jesus gave it to me, you know that I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.